All right, everybody, welcome. And we're going to be talking today about how you can go through and keep AI from becoming your next data breach. We're going to really be digging into, well, how AI is quietly opening new doors for hackers inside of your environment. Before we get started, though, I want to just hand it over to Byron. Thank you so much for hosting this and making this happen today, Byron. I really appreciate you and your team.
Yeah, really excited to have you here and join us as part of this presentation. I'm Byron, CEO of Technologize, and we are IT professionals and firm here in Tri-Cities, Washington. We service Washington State and Oregon. And this is Bruce McCully. He is a CEO and security expert from Galactic Advisors, and they've been a great partner for us for a really long time. And so we're really excited today to be able to collaborate with them.
Yeah, folks, and you're probably wondering why I have anything to say about AI and what this all matters to us here at Galactic, or why we'd even be doing this session. And the answer is pretty simple. You see, when it comes down to it, I've seen the type of devastation that happens in a community or a business or an individual when an attacker gets in. And if you take a look at AI right now, it's going through and it's unlocking these huge new opportunities for you and your organization. And I'm talking about new ways for you to get things done, but not only getting it done faster, getting it done with more accuracy, and ultimately improving the effectiveness of your entire team. And what we're seeing is everyone is going out there and taking advantage of AI in their organizations. And you're probably wondering, well, what can you do to take advantage of it in your own workplace? And I want to spend a couple of seconds just going through a couple things that you can use AI for. And when I mentioned earlier, grab yourself a piece of paper or grab yourself something to write down documentation with, this is really what I was talking about. So grab something, because I've got some great ideas here and things you can use AI for right now. And I'm actually just going to kind of walk you through how this works. So for instance, if you're working with Microsoft 365, there's a product called Copilot that you can enable. And what you can do is you can actually do some really cool things with Copilot. And I'd like to show you one of them just so you can kind of understand the value here. So imagine that you go to your finance person inside your organization, or maybe you're a smaller organization, you don't have a finance person. Well, one of the things that you want to do is figure out cash flow. And that's really figuring out the projections of what kind of cash is going to be available for the organization as you grow, right? So if you think about it, you've got balance sheets, that's one major financial report. You have your profit and loss report, and then you have cash flow, which is another major component of figuring out if your business is healthy. Well, putting together cash flow statements is a big pain in the rear end. It takes a lot of time, and it's really difficult to get done and really difficult to get done right. And so what you could do is you could simply go into your general ledger product. Maybe it's QuickBooks, or maybe it's a practice management software, whatever it is, where you track incoming payments and outgoing invoices. Okay, so wherever that is, you can export a little list. And I exported one just to kind of put together here. I'm calling it transaction sheet demo 1.xls. And all you have to do is take it and put it into a chat window, like just drop it into chat with Copilot, and you can ask it a quick question. And so I just kind of want to walk you through how that looks. So summarize the monthly net cash flow trends for transaction sheet, identify any seasonal variance, okay? And give me a visualization. And so it's going to go through and it's going to put this together for you. It's going to look at seasonal patterns and even give you information on that, and ultimately give you a really quick visualization. And then you could say something like, based on the last 3 months of cash flow forecast, the next 6 months, what will they look like? And can you give me something like a simple linear regression model? Okay, and boom, it creates it. And well, we got some problems. If you take a look here, you'll notice the cash flow's headed the wrong direction. And then I could also just say, hey, I got a board meeting coming up. Can you write a paragraph for that board meeting? Okay, these are very simple prompts, and I'm going pretty quick here, but you can see as these prompts go in, well, you can see what type of results we're getting and how fast this comes together. So add a column calculating a cash risk score for each month based on variability, negative cash flow, and trend volatility. Okay, very easy question to ask. Now, this is AI, so sometimes it doesn't go right the first time. Let's just do that again. And what you'll see here is we are able to put together a really simple function and ultimately end up with an updated transaction sheet with risk scores. So if we go and we open that up, you'll see there's a new column added to it that has those risk scores already in there for us. So guys, this is some pretty simple stuff. And as you can see, it was very fast. And you can do the same exact thing with ChatGPT as well. I did this in Copilot, but I want to show you in ChatGPT as well. Copilot's something that's kind of built into your M365 that you can turn on there. But with ChatGPT, well, you can go through and you can actually do this very same thing. You can copy from the document, paste it right into the chat window. It will analyze it. It will act as though it's reading right from the Excel spreadsheet because I copied and pasted it. I didn't even have to upload the Excel spreadsheet. You could do that as well, obviously. And I can give it that first prompt here, give me linear regression. Now, chat's a little bit better at this when it comes to graphical displays, and some of its commentary is a little bit clearer. So it's put together a really nice example paragraph here on our findings. Now, I could go through each one of those different prompts that I showed you earlier. Okay, so this is really plug and play. And what I want to make sure that you saw here is just how easy it was for us to take that data and put it in. I'm going to go back and I just want to show you this one more time. So all I did when it comes to this is I went through and I'm just going to play this again. I just copied it and I pasted it right into the chat window. And now I'm able to get all of that analysis done just by asking a few questions. So again, really, really simple and plug and play. So I want you to think about this. Did you just learn something that you could use immediately? Especially if you're a business owner, think about, holy cow, how much time you're going to be able to save by just copying and pasting the transactions from the last 30 to 90 days into ChatGPT. You don't even have to really go through and get anything plugged in or connected to your environment. You could just go through and do that. So I want you to take a second though, and I want you to think about what we just went through. I want you to think about if that was your company's actual data. What did you just share with these different AI products? And I know you're thinking, well, I shared a customer list. I shared some payment information. Does this really matter? And there's something that just came out. Now, this is something that just came out in the news yesterday, and that is inside ChatGPT, you can actually share a chat with somebody. So if I was on a chat with Byron, I could actually share it with him. I could send him a link to it. Well, guess what? Google is actually crawling those links. And so that means that chat, if I share it, would be public information that could be Googled. So think about that. Think about what that means when it comes to your organization. There was a statistic that was shared in the same article, and I think this is really interesting. 10% of communications with chatbots right now include sensitive data. So that means 10% of the time your team is uploading sensitive data when they do that. And that's really what we're talking about here, folks. We're talking about sensitive data. And as you go through and you look at this, the question is, well, should you have uploaded this data or not? And that's where the challenge begins. As in, did you break your company's rules? Do you currently in your organization have policies around AI usage? Are you clear with your team what is safe and what isn't safe? And I know you're probably thinking, okay, well, the truth is we're probably leaking some sensitive data. And well, that is really what we're going to talk about here because most breaches happen because of insider threats. I'm talking about a clicked link, I'm talking about a shared password, or I'm talking about a missed wire. These are all insider threats. These are all things that happen because somebody on your team was actually the threat. It doesn't matter what their intentions were, they are the person that went through and allowed this to happen, or they're the person that initiated the entire process. And so that's why many organizations have cyber awareness training. In fact, that's something that most standards require. And if you have cyber insurance, it's something that you will need to have in place and have evidence that that is happening on a routine basis. But there's a problem with cyber awareness training, and that is there's a new employee on your team and they skipped it. As in, AI is actually something you should be thinking about as a new employee on your team, an assistant maybe to the rest of your team. And this employee needs some guardrails. And that is what we are going to dig into today. We're going to talk about how to get those guardrails in place because your team is already using AI. They're already doing it. How do I know? Well, there's some research out there that shows that 75% of employees are using AI in the workspace already. This is from Microsoft's work trend analysis that they did earlier this year. And the thing is they're not telling you that they're doing it, and they're not telling you how they're doing it. When asked, just over half of the employees who use AI, 52%, say that they're reluctant to divulge that they're actually applying it to their most important tasks. And roughly the same number worry that using it for their critical tasks puts them at risk of being replaced. But here's the real problem. Your employees don't understand the risk. Think about earlier when I went through that demonstration, I went through how easy that was to do. Folks, are your employees thinking about that data, about your customer list, about your other employees' very sensitive information? Because what AI sees, AI stores. And that's where the problem begins. So for instance, if you go through and you link AI to emails or Excel or documents or SharePoint or CRM software, now all of a sudden it is going through and using that information, which is good and bad, but it's also storing that information inside a special database that we've seen numbers of situations where attackers have been able to get to. And there's another little problem. And the little problem is free models. Okay, so we talked about ChatGPT. Their basic free model system, which is what most employees are using today, as in they're not using a team account or a paid subscription. These free models go through and basically use your data to train the models, which means that every response after you've given it data is basically using your data to respond. So does this stuff matter? Well, let's take a closer look, and we're going to dig into data leakage. In order to think of data leakage, I like to think of three different doors. I like to think of the front door, I like to think of the back door, and I like to think of the side door. So the front door is simple. This is employees feeding AI sensitive data. And the problem is that, well, we've got personal data, financial information, intellectual property, and credentials slash communications. These items, when fed into AI, whether it's a unsanctioned free model or whether it's an actual private model, now become part of future responses. The problem that we see in organizations right now is that the employees are only seeing the reward. They're seeing the productivity improvement. They're not going through and seeing the risk. And one third of employees admit to having input sensitive data. And folks, if you think about it, this is how risk unfolds. Let me give you a quick example. I'm going to use a very big organization. Now, why am I using a big organization rather than a smaller organization like something local? And the answer is because smaller organizations that go through these types of events don't make the news. However, when Samsung goes through and leaks proprietary information to ChatGPT, that makes the news. So what happened? Pretty straightforward. An engineer on their team was using it to go through and speed up their programming and research and development. How did they do it? They uploaded the source code the very same way that I showed you how you could go through and copy and paste transactions. And this left that data exposed. And the key here is that chatbots don't forget. And Samsung learned the hard way because somebody was able to then learn about what Samsung was doing by simply asking. This is how generative AI gets banned. And that's what happened at Samsung. They stopped using it. They said, full stop, no more generative AI. But it wasn't the AI's fault, and it wasn't the employee's fault. The issue here was they didn't have clear rules about what should and shouldn't happen when it comes to AI. And what can get leaked? Well, these could be things like trade secrets, intellectual property, and financial information. So the question is, what is your AI policy? And do you know that your policies for proper AI use are in place? And does your team know that they're in place? So that's the front door and how to protect it. And I'm going to give you some tools here in a minute to help you with that. There's another door though. This is the back door. And this is AI harvesting data automatically. So imagine for a minute that someone on your team has some sort of PII or personally identifiable information on their computer. So just imagine that that's happening. And an example that we see all the time. So one of the things that we do at our organization is we analyze environments. So we go through and we provide an analysis to see what someone's cyber hygiene looks like. And basically what that means is, what does it look like when it comes to how people are storing information in their environment, for example? And so what we often see, especially around February and March of the year, is we find people downloading their 401k census to their computers. In fact, when we do an analysis today, if we end up hitting somebody in the finance area, we often find that still in their downloads. Well, guess what? Hackers are looking for that, they steal it, they use it, and that becomes a data breach. Okay, but let's think about AI for a minute. Let's imagine that they left this in their downloads. Well, Copilot, when enabled to analyze your documents, does look in your downloads and it sees and stores that information. It does not ask for permission. In fact, if you talk to Microsoft about this, this is again directly from Microsoft. Microsoft Copilot for Microsoft 365 assesses content and context through Microsoft Graph. It can generate responses anchored in your organizational data, such as user documents, emails, calendars, chats, meetings, and contacts. What does this mean in normal speak? It means that Microsoft is accessing all of your information that either is on OneDrive or in SharePoint using Microsoft Graph for Copilot. So what do you do about this? Well, this is where security settings come in. So for instance, you go through and you categorize data and you categorize it so it's encrypted, so only certain people can read it. And this can be used to tell Copilot, hey, hands off, you're not supposed to look at this. And that is how you prevent data scooping. But there is an issue, which is if you're doing this improperly, you have a huge risk. And that is because, well, if you're not categorizing sensitive data and Copilot gets enabled, well, now your employee doesn't actually have to put the data into Copilot, it just automatically is there. One of the things that our organization does is we go through and we do what's called a penetration test. And I want you to think about that for a second. I'll just explain how it works. So what organizations do is they pay our team to go in and identify where the vulnerabilities are in the network by having our team act like hackers and get in. And so one of the things that we learned, which is crazy, is that Copilot is a ready assistant for you once you land inside of a network. And what I mean by this is after, like if you're going through and you're working on getting into a network, after you get in, what we used to have to do is we'd have to analyze all the environment looking for stuff. And that's noisy and that set off alarms because everybody has tools in place to detect things like us going through and trying to look everywhere for open vulnerabilities or something like this. And so what are hackers doing today? What are we doing today? Well, we just ask Copilot. We say, okay, where's the sensitive information and what is it? Oh, let me show you. That is the risk that you have when it comes to not categorizing sensitive data. And the last piece that we have is the side door. And this is where you have people on your team using plugins or integrations. Now, there are really two areas that we have to worry about here. The first one is that hackers know that you want to be more efficient. Everybody does. Everybody wants to be more efficient. We all do. It's human nature. I want to get more done with less time because time is something that we don't have a lot of access to. So what are hackers doing? Well, they're embedding malware into AI applications. And that turns into backdoors. Here's an example of how hackers are weaponizing code agents and getting access to a backend for an AI product. And this turns into security breaches. Now, the major one, of course, I'm pointing out the very big organizations because those are the ones that make the news. The major one was Disney. An employee downloaded a free open source AI graphics generating tool onto his computer, which did generate AI graphics for him, but it also harvested all of his passwords and all of his account credentials to Disney. And we're not talking about his Disney Plus account. We're talking about this is the enterprise access to Disney, his actual employee accounts. And this went through and exposed company data and trade secrets. The other thing that hackers are doing, like I mentioned earlier, is asking AI for advice. Now, The most sophisticated attack vector is to say, hey, my bank's website uses Apache 2.3 and their login page is here, and I'm concerned about SQL injections. Can you give me a way to figure that out? And it's going to actually write some code for you to give you a SQL injection attack. And the last piece that we have to think about when it comes to AI is that there's a huge demand for programmers to quickly build AI tools. And so AI researchers themselves are being targeted. So why does AI want all of your data? Why is this happening? Well, the answer is simple. When it all comes down to it, you're training AI. That's your job. If you're using AI, you're literally training it to get better at doing your job. You're training it to solve problems, you're training it to communicate, and you're ultimately providing it feedback with, hey, you did a good job or you didn't do a good job. So you're building AI right now with every chat that you have and every piece of data you share. So is your team. The problem is they might be building it with your sensitive data. So one last little note for all the AI users out there. AI has been proven to make you dumber. Now, what do I mean by this? There's something called atrophy, and it's a good way to think of muscle, right? You use your muscle and you build it up or you lose it. And that is the risk with AI. And there's a MIT research that came out showing that AI does, in fact, reduce the amount of cognitive capacity of the individual user. Have I scared the hell out of you yet? Well, that's what we were looking for. That's exactly how I want you to be at this very moment. So what I want to do is I want to help you figure out how to address this. The first thing you have to understand is how AI works. And basically, the way to think about it is AI is a system that learns to generate more objects that look exactly like the data it was trained on. And that means you're basically creating a trained expert making decisions based on years and years of practice and expertise. So it learns patterns that are so complicated that people can't even understand them. This is where the black box problem comes in. And people on your team trust what computers tell them, and AI can hallucinate it. It can actually generate inaccurate results, and people are used to trusting computers, so that turns into a little situation. My suggestion when working with AI is that you keep the person involved. You have the person always being the interface between AI and your data, or the AI and the outside world, because ultimately we can't see inside of what AI is doing. The other thing that happens is that, well, when you go through and you just trust AI and you let it interact directly with people, or you don't take the time to think through the results yourself, you're basically taking risk. So I'm suggesting that you spend time auditing what AI is saying. So there's another piece, which is how do you get this rolled out into your organization? As in, how do you go through and make sure that you've established expectations around this? What will you allow? What will you not allow? And I want you to establish this immediately. When you leave this call, I'm going to give you one thing that you can go do, and I want you to go through and take advantage of it. You see, some of the people you work with may not want their data used for AI training. In fact, some larger contracts specifically call out no AI. We're talking contracts, vendors, and we're also talking customer expectations. These are assumptions that your customers have, and ultimately they're hitting promises that you're making right now. So what is the first step? Like, where do you start this all out? And the answer is you implement an acceptable use policy. But this is a special acceptable use policy. It's not the normal one that you might have in your organization. It's an AI acceptable use policy. And we're going to drop a link to a very simple worksheet that you can have and use in the chat here in a second. And that worksheet will give you some questions. It's going to ask you a few things like what's okay and what's not okay inside your organization. And this can be used to build out a very simple acceptable use policy. And you're going to customize this depending on the preferences of your organization. I'm just going to give you a couple of the questions. These are actually questions that are inside the worksheet. Are generative AI apps and services allowed or prohibited? You're just going to answer that question, allowed or prohibited. If allowed, which ones are officially endorsed, or which ones do you have accounts purchased on? Remember, if you're not paying for the AI, if you're using it for free, you're the product, and so is your data. So in that case, you're going to want to be very cautious and make sure that you're clear that they're only allowed to use specific tools that you've endorsed and paid for, so that your data isn't training the model that's being used for everything else. Next, who in your organization is responsible for approving use of AI? Who in the organization is responsible for implementation of AI, and what is considered acceptable or unacceptable use? And there's a couple of bullets that you'll just go through and answer. Guys, it's that easy to get this put together. And the thing that I want you to think about here is AI is super powerful. We want your team using it, but you can't just give it a blank check to have access to all of your data, because AI security is not automatic. And we want to make sure that you're not exposing sensitive data, increasing your attack surface, or lining yourself up for a compliance event, as in breaking the rules, which lead to regulatory fines or liability. And the key is to have this policy. So you go through and you do the policy, you get that piece done. The next question is, well, what else do you need to do? Because having a policy doesn't actually mean that it's being adopted. I mean, have you ever went through and had a policy fail? Like you go through and you tell your team you're going to do this thing, and then they don't do it. And the key here is pretty straightforward. You're going to want to get signatures from your team that they understand it and create evidence that you have this in place. But what about the data? And how do you go through and get access to this? And what I'm going to suggest is you simply get an assessment. And what do I mean by an assessment? Well, our team can go through and we can analyze your data hygiene for you. And I know you're probably thinking, yeah, this isn't really my job. But here's the thing. If there's an event, or if it's your own personal data, it doesn't matter. Risk is everyone's job. And this is something you're eventually going to make time for, because you're going to want to make sure that you've gone through and gotten an analysis of your data to understand how well your team is doing when it comes to protecting those key components. Because just having the policy isn't enough. You're going to want to be able to say, hey, somebody in finance has this particular folder in place, and this is containing some sensitive information. We want to make sure it doesn't get picked up by mistake. And so what I'm going to recommend to you is very simple. You can get a free cyber risk assessment, and Byron's offered to go through and help this get started. So if you go to info.technologize.com/free vulnerability assessment, my team will assist and we'll go through, we'll analyze the security, and we'll go through and help make sure that you have simple steps that you can take to protect yourself and the data that you have inside of your environment. The key here is to be proactive and not wait until you have a situation on your hands. And when you do this properly, you end up reducing liability by knowing where your risk is and being able to address that risk by properly categorizing all of that data. And you're probably wondering, what's the catch? Folks, there's no catch. I started Galactic Advisors with a mission to help protect 1 million people. And as part of that, we are dedicated to helping people understand their risk when it comes to things like AI. So that's what I wanted to cover today. And I'm just kind of checking out there. Are there any questions or anything that we need to help folks out with?
Bruce, while we wait for questions, I just wanted to say this information's been very, very insightful and helpful. And, I like what you said about, there's a lot of things to be scared about, but the reality is as we put guardrails in place and we get visibility on where our data is at, we can embrace it. We can definitely leverage AI, like you said, but we just have to understand the risk and where those gaps are at. And it's been very helpful for a lot of our clients as we've gone through some of these assessments and given them visibility on where their information's at, as well as help educate, right, the risk and so their user base can understand best practice and overall, because we love it. I love AI, right? And it's the talk of the town really right now. Everybody's talking about it. And because it's great, it's exciting, it is, and it's sexy, and so, but understanding how, just like a lot of things, I mean, it's like just there's a lot of things that Microsoft, for example, Copilot, they provide the platform, right? But it's also our responsibility to make sure that we have our information protected, properly categorized and classified, and as such, as you said, sensitive or whatnot, in order to ensure that we can use it and empower our people to use it within a safe, within safe parameters.
Absolutely, Byron. I mean, when you take a look at this, it's such a huge opportunity to go through and be more effective, and at the same time, to be able to turn around and get more things done than was ever possible ever before. So no wonder it's the talk of the town. No wonder it's the hottest thing since sliced bread. But the question again is, how do you educate your team and how do you help them build those guardrails out, like Byron was saying? And Byron, you can actually help people with doing that, right? Like you can help them set up
Oh,
categorization for their data and stuff like that so that they don't have to
absolutely.
worry.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so powerful. And that's really leveraging technology that often people already have, right? Because a lot of this, depending on licensing, with Microsoft 365, for example, there's a lot of opportunity to leverage tools they may already have.
Now, there's a couple of questions that are kind of popping in here. So the first one is what about process AI like Scribe? And here's the thing, folks. If you're not fully understanding what the AI solution has access to, or what the organization is doing with your data is at risk. So if you're using something like Scribe, go take a look at the EULA, the end user license agreement. Take a look at what they're doing with your data. And if you're interested, we can help you with that. Just schedule that assessment and we'll actually go through, and that'll be some of the discussion that we can have on the side when it comes to understanding what kind of risks are associated with these different solutions. There's also another question about how do you deal with things like Google? Like if we're saying no AI in our environment, and somebody does a search and Google responds and it gives you an AI summary, isn't that AI? And the answer is absolutely. And the policy workbook that we gave you actually works through some of those pieces for you to really make that much easier to handle and get through. All right, folks. Well, I think we're at our end of our time together. Make it a fantastic rest of your day. And if you took nothing else from today, and it sounds like too much work to put together that AI policy, do yourself a favor and at least get started. At least get this assessment done. Like I said earlier, we'll come in, we'll analyze your security, we'll analyze the solutions in place, but also we'll look at how data is being categorized, and we'll make sure that you're actually defending your data from a user in your organization, like somebody else downloading an AI tool and just running it. All right, everyone, thank you so much for your time. And
Thanks, Bruce, for joining us, and thanks for bringing this to our attention and sharing this information with us.
absolutely, thanks again, Byron. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.